It doesn't seem that from a personal tax point of view it will be something which will be too friendly from an individual perspective. While we used to have an infrastructure bonds of 80 CCF deduction earlier.
There are 2 or 3 key incentives which they are talking about right now, wherein there is a lot of revenue which they are losing.
Indirect taxes, because current indirect taxes are quite complicated.
It doesn't seem that from a personal tax point of view it will be something which will be too friendly from an individual perspective.
Okay.
Because either you see these kind of reforms in the first budget or you see these reforms in the fifth budget. But frankly, at this point of time, the budget seems that the objective will be growth and the objective will be reforms, right? Especially because of the way the world economy is positioned and the way the China economy is there as on date. It gives a lot of avenues for Indian economy to move really up if some significant changes are taken across. So while I said that there's not going to be much on account of personal tax change, and always the expectation levels are very high, but seems like we are going to see an increase in slab rate from 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees.
Okay.
So that's one thing. The tax benefit from an individual perspective would be close to 10 to 15,000 rupees, and that would come more on account of probably slabs and one of the additional deduction that he will give as a benefit. So that's more on account of personal taxes.
Okay.
While we used to have an infrastructure bonds of 80 CCF deduction earlier, it could be possible that on account of the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas objective, he ensures that he again asks individuals to put 50,000 rupees into infrastructure bonds, so that individuals' money is now part of the infrastructural growth of the country. And people start feeling that it is their money which gives this benefit, plus they get the tax benefit on account of putting that money into 80 CCF, an additional deduction over 80C.
Corporate tax side, in terms of the taxation per se, I think we should see some reduction happening this year, okay? Because they have to start on the roadmap which they committed earlier. Correspondingly, 2 things should happen simultaneously. One is in terms of a clear guidance as to which all incentives are likely to go in near future and whether they are going to reduce any incentives at present. There are 2 or 3 key incentives which they are talking about right now, wherein there is a lot of revenue which they are losing. One is in terms of certain items where there is accelerated depreciation. So we may see some rationalization on the depreciation aspect.
Okay, because the investment is linked to that in a way.
Possible. See, I think more and more the mindset of the government and the bureaucracy is becoming that let's not link incentives to the investments now. Okay, let's provide more of an ecosystem kind of thing. Like if you look at even the startups, some of the announcements in terms of tax incentives, etc., most of the startups will continue to incur losses for 8 to 10 years. So it's more of a ecosystem that they need to build in.
Earlier they talked about removing the profit linked incentives first and then the investment linked incentives.
Yes.
Now the idea is to remove all.
Gradually. Because that's how you will arrive at 25% effective tax rate. If you continue with
So
surcharge.
identifying also, will they identify the profit linked ones first if you say the reduction? The reduction will be more in the case of
Profit linked
ones.
Profit linked. And if you look at it more from the tax simplification process, I think we have actually complicated the whole tax law because of the tax incentive mechanisms and the provisions that have been introduced. Each kind of incentive has its own mechanism in terms of computation. Instead of that, why don't we look at a structure wherein you say, okay, your income is taxed at 25%. Here there are few industries which will tax at say 22.5% or 20%. At least to my mind, 40 to 50% of the litigation, if not more, will end in single shot. Instead of introducing all these provisions wherein you have to do the computation under ATI and then various other provisions, 10A, half of the time we are keep on debating whether you are software or IT enabled and all that. Those definitions also confuse. Look at a scenario, we say, okay, there's a simple tax computation, irrespective of the industry, you compute it. on an average will tax the entire industry at 25% or 30% at present rate. These industries will tax at 20% for next 5 years. Half of your litigation goes, industry is happy because it's much simplified structure that way. I think those kind of rational thoughts have to be brought in
But
the
exactly
tax
the change
system.
the actual
Of indirect taxes, because current indirect taxes are quite complicated. There are various issues in terms of multiple taxes, cascading and all that. So the current government has shown a lot of commitment in terms of simplifying the taxes, and that's why GST we have been hearing for last almost 2 years. And the earlier government was also wanted to implement GST. So since GST has been delayed and we don't see that 1st April 16 would be the date for GST, so government has a lot to do in terms of simplifying the current central taxes, excise, service tax. So in terms of there are many cesses which are applicable today, so and which are not creditable, so which leads to cascading. So it is expected that
how many sources are applicable?
there's a clean energy cess, there's a national calamity contingent duty, there's a Swachh Bharat cess which was recently levied
Without credit.
without credit. So and the always the objective of levying cesses is short term to achieve a particular objective, and these cesses like clean energy cess and they are being in implementation for many years. So these cesses should be make part of the base rate and part of the
You think
credit.
that will happen?
It is expected that this should be done if they want to move towards GST. So that's the homework for the government. Second is the credit rationalization, because under GST what is expected that all the legitimated business expenses would be allowed as credit. So even when negative list was introduced in 2012, everything under service sector was made liable to service tax. So the idea was that all the business expenses would be, the credit would be given for all the business expenses. But currently also a lot of dispute is there in terms of SANVAT credit on whether services are used for providing of output services or not. Still there are so many restrictions, setting up of offices, premises and all that. So those credits are not available currently. So it is expected that they will move towards that GST regime and by liberalizing the credit which are not available today.